I don't know if you saw these images, an enormous explosion and fire. Shocking images visible even from flying airplanes. Terrible smoke and flames. Evacuation of a village and its environs because of the chemicals in the fire. There was even some conflict between the media and the National Guard that were brought in to evacuate the town. What the heck is going on in East Palestine, Ohio? That's how you pronounce that little village's name. You know, it reminded me instantly of the tragic and horrific fire in Lac Mégantic in Quebec in 2013. You might recall an oil train coming through that Quebec town exploded and burned, killing 47 people. Of course, I do not wish to politicize that fire, though many did. I note that the safest way to transport oil, although rail is quite safe, is through a pipeline, which has been blocked by Quebec. Well, this was an industrial train that was going through East Palestine, and that is typically the safest way to move industrial goods, by train. What was interesting is that the fire was made in a decision, a willful decision to proactively ignite some of the chemicals. That's why the town was evacuated. Now, some of these chemicals, of course, have scary words in them like chlorine, vinyl chloride. Why did the authorities decide to light them on fire? Well, what happens sometimes when you don't proactively burn certain chemicals, they have an explosion because of the nature of that chemical. There's something called a bleave or a blevy, which is a kind of acronym for boiling liquid, expanding vapor, explosion. Blevy, it's just an acronym. Here's the terrifying fact of what a blevy is. In other words, it's when you don't proactively explode and light on fire some chemicals. They might explode on their own. Take a look at this.
Some of the most spectacular blevies have occurred at train derailments. 1983, a wrecked train with 11 tank cars holding highly combustible materials bursts into flames near Murdoch, Illinois. It chooses to stay behind, a half mile from the flames.
The fire is making a sound like a jet liner taking off. Something apparently blew up just a couple of minutes ago and started this big roar of flames and the sound of a jet liner.
What the news crew doesn't know is that the noise they are hearing is a warning of an impending blevy carrying propane gas. Moments after the reporter signs off, 30,000 gallons of boiling propane push the tank's metal walls to the breaking point. The news crew feels the heat wave from the blast. In this blast, rockets nearly 3/4 of a mile into a field.
At the Murdoch explosion, the propane car, that blevy, set a record and traveled 3,640 feet.
As night falls, the flames finally make their way to a nearby tank car filled with highly flammable isobutane. Latest blevy creates a blinding whiteout as 50,000 gallons of fuel is ignited.
So what on earth is really going on there? What happened to the train? Who made the decision to blow it up and to evacuate? Was that the right decision? Well, we decided to send some reporters down there to follow the facts because I don't know about you, but my Twitter feed was full of speculation. People even comparing it to Chernobyl, people saying that there was a massive government cover-up. Is that true? Or was it just people on Twitter doing what they do best, speculating and using their imaginations and cooking up a kind of conspiracy theory? Well, we sent our lads down from Toronto, and here's their first report they filed when they started their day early this morning in East Palestine, Ohio.
Lincoln J reporting for Rebel News. Now, as you can see by the sign beside me, we are in the village of East Palestine, Ohio. Now, this name may sound familiar to some of you, as a train containing hazardous chemicals derailed, and essentially all of those chemicals have spilled, causing thousands of the residents here to evacuate. Who is to blame? Do the residents feel safe? Is it safe to be here right now? That's what we're gonna find out as we're here on the ground at the scene of the accident. Just last week, a major train derailment of 50 cars carrying very hazardous chemicals has resulted in thousands of people being evacuated by officials over the fear of the explosion setting off.
It was a mess. I took my wife to the doctor, and coming back from the doctor, we couldn't even get back to our house. And we had no clothes, no medicine, nothing. We had to go to Youngstown to get a room.
One of those chemicals is vinyl chloride, which is extremely toxic to humans.
We're still very nervous about it because they keep coming up with contaminated water problems, and I don't know, I'm even half afraid to shop.
Fast forward to today, the evacuation order has been lifted. We've already spoken to residents on the ground, and many of them simply feel that there isn't much transparency here.
My kids, we're just running in to grab something, and then we're going back to grandma's house because they keep breaking out in rashes.
Kids do?
Yeah.
So you kind of answered my next question. Do you feel like it's safe here right now?
I feel like we're not being told everything. I know something came out yesterday about them covering up contaminated soil when they rebuilt the railroad instead of pulling it out like they promised.
But many of the residents are pointing the blame at Norfolk Southern, the company responsible for the train. Do you think it's safe here right now?
I don't know. They're to me, they're keeping everything kind of hush hush. You know, they're not telling everybody everything. You know.
We'll talk to Lincoln J a little bit more later on in the show. Here's what I think. I think that trains are extremely safe. There's trains all over America. We don't really pay attention to them because most of them are not passenger trains. We prefer to go by car. There's so many trains carrying so much stuff on so many tracks that there are about 4 derailments every day in America. Sounds like a lot, until you realize that there are 40,000 vehicle accidents on our highways in America. There'd be a proportionate number of accidents in Canada. And of course, most industrial products go by train as opposed to by truck, especially if you're taking certain things. You generally don't go through towns. You are on rural railroads. But this was spectacular, this fire and this explosion. But it's not that abnormal to have a spectacular explosion once in a while in a country as large as the United States. But here's what I think was really torched in East Palestine, Ohio. The chemicals were, the train was, there was a derailment. But I think what was really torched were the experts. And the problem is, something not regular, but not unusual happened, a derailment, an explosion. But we don't trust the media or the government anymore. Here, for example, is Joe Biden's transport secretary, Pete Buttigieg, talking about everything except for the railway explosion. He's even talking about the racism of highways. That's one of his favorite subjects. Here he is, not addressing the fire and the explosion.
To work with your contractors, to work with your community colleges on building a workforce that reflects the community. We have heard way too many stories from generations past of infrastructure where you got a neighborhood, often a neighborhood of color, that finally sees the project come to them, but everyone in the hard hats on that project looking like, doing the good paying jobs, don't look like they came from anywhere near the neighborhood.
Right.
You can build community wealth that will help close wealth gaps in this country. if we can tear down those barriers. But that happens at the delivery level.
Now, maybe he just didn't think it was worth addressing, or maybe he was covering something up. That's the thing. When you're so skeptical about your leaders, you no longer give them the benefit of the doubt. That was an excerpt from the Ezra Levant Show. I'm Ezra Levant. Every weekday, I do a monologue about the topic of the day. Then I interview a fascinating guest either in studio or via Skype. And then I read your mail, whether it's fan mail or hate mail, which is sometimes even more interesting. This is on our premium service, though, called Rebel News Plus. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. It's $8 a month or less if you buy a whole year in advance. You get my show every weeknight, plus Sheila Gunn Reid's show every week. It's called The Gun Show. It's pretty amazing. You know, we rely on you because we do not take a dime from the government. In Canada, that makes us almost unique. So please help us out and help yourself to some great journalism at rebelnewsplus.com.